Good evening to the East Coast viewers, and good afternoon to those on the West Coast. Welcome to Energize the Native Vote. It is a promotion of the Native American Native News Online and Verizon Media and MMCA. Tonight, we are going to have a roundtable with American Indians from different parts of the United States. And I am excited about tonight's panel. And before I get into introduce the panelists and our managing editor from Native News Online, I want to thank our lead sponsors, Verizon Media and MMCA, and that is the Multicultural Media Correspondents Association based in Washington, D.C. So I would like at this point to thank some other sponsors that have sponsoring what we're going to be doing this fall during this election season. That's Four Directions, the nonprofit organization committed to advancing equality at the ballot box across Indian country. And Rosette Law, a leading majority Indian-owned national law firm representing tribal governments and tribal entities with offices in Arizona, California, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Washington, D.C. And we have the Sault Ste. Marie tribe also is a lead sponsor out of northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. And next, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Kyle Edwards, and he's actually on the West Coast. Good evening, Kyle.
Thanks so much, Levi. Tonight is one of two events. We'll be talking to Native voters from around the country. Monday night, we'll be talking to experts about the upcoming election. And over the next few weeks, we'll also be ramping up our election coverage here at Native News Online. For us this year, we're thrilled to be a part of ProPublica's Election Land Project as we aim to uncover issues regarding the upcoming November 3rd election, everything from voter suppression to the challenges that Native voters have when casting a ballot. And we'll tell you a bit more about that later on. Levi, I'm going to throw it back to you to introduce our voter roundtable tonight.
Thanks, Kyle. Tonight we're going to be talking to 5 Native Americans and from around the country and about what matters to them when it comes to making their decision in the ballot box. Some are Democrats, 1 or 2 are Republican, and 1 is undecided. So we are pleased to have them. In our roundtable participants tonight are Malilin, who he's a member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Indians. And I don't think Noah's with us quite yet, but then we have Rosetta Walker. She's a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. And we have Dylan Chavez, who is a member of the Navajo Nation. And we have Donna Bergstrom from the Red Lake Nation. Welcome, panelists. I'm happy you're with us tonight. And
Thank you.
I'm gonna start off with the first question, and we want to hear from you tonight. So we don't have a lot of fanfare, so we're going to get right into it. The first question is: so far, there have been 2 debates, the national debates. Presidential debate was held on September 29th. The vice presidential debate was held on October 7th. Did the 2 debates influence your vote in the upcoming presidential election? If so, can you name, give us a good reason why? And I'm going to start with Dylan.
Well, the 2 debates, no, I wouldn't say it influenced my vote. My vote was already secured at that point, but I think I disagreed with the country. With the first presidential debate, it was nothing short of a mess, let's say that. As for the vice presidential debate, it was more civil. I think it's more of a reflection of what the politics were before, before President Trump came into politics, and how everything is really just turned upside down, politics-wise, and how we structure our debates and how we discuss politics and differences with one another. But to answer your question, no, I don't think either debate swayed me to even consider, switching over.
And what about you, Donna? Up in Minnesota.
Right, up in Minnesota, way in northeast Minnesota, the front door of the Iron Range here in Duluth. I was able to watch the presidential debates in full because my son had it actually as a homework assignment. So what I did notice, and I think the takeaway that stood out for me with that debate was President Trump's statement that Vice President Joe Biden had been in politics for 47 years, and his accomplishment list was pretty short compared to President Trump, who had been in office only 47 months and had a pretty significant accomplishment rate. And for myself as a veteran, which I served 20 years in the Marine Corps, I do know that the Mission Act that was passed under the Trump administration has helped me out greatly in being able to receive care that I need here in my community, so I don't have to travel for 2 hours down to the medical facility in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. So that was significant. And then the vice presidential debates, I think, focused on policy more so, and that was interesting to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's talk to you, Manillan. How do you say your name? I am really sorry. I'm stumbling over it tonight.
Manillan, but you can call me Manny. It's totally fine.
Manny?
Manny.
Okay, Manny. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Manny.
Yeah, to be honest, as previously stated by Kyle and Donna, the presidential and vice presidential debates did not sway who was going to vote. But I think more importantly, what we saw during the national conventions, which were broadcast, which I had a chance to see, really nailed home why I am supporting Joe Biden and why I'm supporting Democrats up and down the ticket. You saw firsthand how Native Americans were portrayed at those conventions virtually, and we saw how powerful our voices were within those parties and our representation. So I think, the debates are what they are. I don't think there's many persuadable voters left. I think more importantly, where we are today is it's how do we turn out and how do we ensure that the voices of those who are ready to be activated are going to be heard at the ballot box this November.
What about you, Rosetta? You're down in Arizona, Tempe.
Yes, I'm here in Tempe, Arizona, where we're still about at 100 degrees. But I did take in the DNC campaign convention, and I also did watch both of the debates. And I do that because I live in a split household. I'm a Democrat and have been for years, but my husband is Republican. And so I get to hear it from both sides. We have some lively debate. We do draw the line on what we are vocal about in this household. But I think it's very, very important. And we have a 27-year-old daughter, for her to form her own opinions. And for that debate to happen within the household is good. It's good because she's seeing firsthand, we're practicing democracy. We all got our ballots in the mail. And, I really enjoy the conversation here. And Manny, I understand what you're saying, though, that, people's minds are pretty much made up. I will be voting blue. I will be voting blue up down the ballot. And however my husband chooses to vote, that's the democracy at work in our household.
And I think that's good. I'm happy to hear that because I, for one, think that America has gotten so polarized, and I would love to have a candidate come and bring us all together, and especially on things that really matter. I think it's just my experience, my observation the last, I would say, decade or two, it has gotten so polarized and so partisan, and it's really vicious. Let me ask you this question. Would any of you be disappointed if that third debate was canceled next week?
I think it's always good for the public to be able to hear, more rather than less. So from that perspective, I would say, yes, I would be disappointed. But, it's a different time right now, and these COVID times, have just changed everything, honestly. And so I would understand if it got changed or if it had to be canceled.
Yes. And Kyle, I'm going to turn it back to you for the second question.
Great, thank you. American Indians and Alaska Natives have always faced a variety of challenges when it comes to casting their votes. This year, there has been much discussion on voter suppression in the upcoming election. I really want each of you to tell us about your voting experience so far. Are you facing any obstacles? And secondly, do you plan to vote in person or by mail? And I'm going to ask you to keep your answer for this one a little short, 20 to 30 seconds. And I'm going to start with you, Dylan.
The only problems I did have was during the primary, which was June for New Mexico. I live in relative close proximity to my voting location, which is why I will be voting at that location at this time. Other than that, that was the only problem I did encounter.
Mm-hmm. Manny, I'll come over to you with that one.
Yeah, I was really proud. I've already cast my ballot. That being said, we know that voter suppression is a huge issue in Indian country, and it's why we, Democrats are working to make sure that there are polling places that are accessible to Indian country. And so working towards that is kind of my goal, since I've already cast my ballot, to make sure that all of my people of my tribe is casting their ballot.
Donna, have you cast your vote so far, and any challenges doing that?
I have not cast my ballot yet. I'm thinking I'm still going to vote November 3rd, but I'm listening and seeing what's happening here in the community, so I may change my mind on that. But the biggest thing for me, and I live in Duluth, Minnesota, which is a city, and we don't really have any issues here getting to the polls or early voting or absentee voting. The biggest thing for me, though, is we have a specific statute here in Minnesota that requires our absentee ballots to be counted by election judges, and there's some concern that that's not being followed in our cities and our counties. So I would think that should be a concern for everybody.
Rosetta, what about you?
I will be casting my ballot in person at the numerous vote centers that are here open in the Maricopa County in Arizona. And I'm also a poll worker, and I have been a poll worker for probably like 20 some years. And people can come in. Right now, our poll centers are open. You can come in, drop off your ballot, cast your ballot. And poll centers have been open October 7th and will be remaining open until, of course, November 3rd. And I got my ballot in the mail. I'm on the permanent early voter list, and I have been for years. And I think people try to use the scare tactics as voter suppression and saying your ballot will get lost. It'll never make it to the vote center. It'll never make it to the elections department. And I don't think that's true at all. My ballot, I signed up for the texting. So it texts me from the Maricopa County Elections Department when it's been mailed. It texts me when I received it, and it texts me when they receive it back. So I think all those places, all those things that are in place help with voter suppression prevention.
Since you're voting in person, Rosetta, there's been a lot of talk, of course, about how COVID-19 would impact this election. Are you concerned at all regarding, the current pandemic and voting in person?
No, I am not. I actually worked the primary, and they meaning the Maricopa County Elections Department was very good about getting us the gloves, the face shield, the masks, all the cleaning supplies, the disinfectant wipes. And we literally would follow a voter that came through and clean the surfaces that voter had ever touched. I didn't feel sick, never have felt sick this whole 6 months that I've been home. And yes, I have been home. And I'm not concerned. I really am not. I feel that I'm taking protective measures for myself and my family.
Mm-hmm. Levi, I will throw it back to you for the next question.
Panelists, you are doing great. I'm loving what I'm hearing tonight, and I know Indian country needs it. The next question deals with something that's kind of dear to my heart, and it's journalism, and it deals with how people get the news. And I, for one, think that there is a lot of misinformation out in society right now, in the public, that people. I watch interviews on television, and people will say things that I just know factually are not true. So I guess to the panelists, I want to ask you, how do you get your news, and how do you cipher through the various misinformation, or how do you determine if it's misinformation or if it's factual? And I guess questions I'd have would be: do you go to Native American news sites, mainstream media news sites only, Facebook, Twitter, television, radio, newspapers, or magazines? And I'm going to start out with, I'm going to go to Donna on that one.
Sure. Yeah, this is familiar to me. I was an intelligence officer in the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow. So you know how to get through it.
I know how to get to the news. Yeah. So really, for me, it's very natural for me to rely on all sorts of different sources. So I go to magazines and the Twitter and Facebook and TV and everywhere. I read, the online sources. So I try to really make myself well-rounded, and I don't look at something just because it's, conservative in nature or liberal in nature. I do read them all. So I think it is difficult to sort through the facts because there is, in my opinion, more advocacy in our journalism now than there has been in the past. And journalism, used to be who, what, when, where, why. And so sorting through all of that is takes a little bit of a time. But I do encourage people to look at multiple sources, even if it's a little, grating on your ears. Listen to it anyway and see what it's called diversity of thought. See what else is happening out there.
And Donna, when you say advocacy, what can you tell me a little more about that? Expound on that.
Sure. Yeah. And what I mean by that is instead of really presenting a story based on what we would consider to be the facts, there were this many people there, it was this type of venue, even just in our local area here, it tends to be quite slanted if it's a conservative venue or a conservative event, and it'll be written up quite negatively rather than if it was a liberal event. And so I think journalism needs to be careful with that, because your readership really deserves, and your listeners deserve to know the straight facts, so to speak. And that was what I meant by the advocacy.
Okay, thank you. That was great. Manny, what about you? Where are you getting your news? I know you get it from Native News Online, for one. You and I had a talk the other night. So.
Very similar to Donna. And first off, Donna, thank you for your service to this country. We cannot thank you enough. We know the sacrifices that our veterans make and their families. But in terms of the news and where we get our information from, I think just as much as we talk about the sources, it's also the impacts of the stories. For me as a voter, this election, as much as we've heard about COVID-19, nothing impacted me more than having a very close young friend of mine die from it. That drove that home. Nothing drove home to me more about what happened with the Dakota Access Pipeline than having friends there on the ground and hearing their stories. So not only are we hearing happening in the news, but also talking to our community members. As Natives, this is what we do. We're storytellers. We are a verbal people, and it's in those stories that we find our resiliency and our call to action. So, as someone who tries to be involved, I find that a very important step as well, as opposed to putting in context of the rest of the United States, right? There's also these Native United States.
That's right. Thank you, Manny. Now, Dylan, you're out on the Indian reservation, Navajo Nation. Tell me how people out in the Navajo Nation are getting their news. Not necessarily just you, because I talk to you and you're pretty attuned with what's going on. But talk more about the average Native person, maybe the average Navajo citizen. How are they getting their news?
Well, I guess it really depends on what generation they're born into. You know, my tribe has a radio station dedicated to, you know, just telling the news in our language, or, you know, what's going around our community, our state, or our country itself. I know my grandparents, you know, they sit home, you know, they do their thing, and they always have the radio on. Always. It doesn't matter what time of day they're drinking their coffee, and it's always the radio. And so it can be music, it can be politics, it can be, you know, a sports update, but, you know, KCNN or KNDN is what we listen to here, and that is pretty much what our elders and, you know, our Navajo-speaking citizens, how they get their news. For younger people, you know, we have all the social media. You always see it's flooding Twitter, it's flooding Instagram, you know, it's flooding Facebook. That's how I get my news, really. You know, I do a lot of Twitter, more than Facebook these days. So that's basically how I connect. But I'm probably more attuned than most because during my time in college, I'm a political science major. So I've always read the news because our professors always encourage that of us to, you know, stay tuned to what's happening around us so that we can relate it to our studies. And that's pretty much how we get it here on the Navajo Nation. So really, I guess it depends on which generation you're born into.
Mm-hmm. And Rosetta, what about you? How do you cipher through? How do you determine what's factual and what are just someone's feelings, or as Rosetta said, advocacy? Maybe somebody's been advocating for a certain position or stance.
Well, I definitely look at all the scrollings on Facebook, and yes, I am on Twitter, and I'm waiting for the TikTok news next.
Up and coming.
And the TV is on occasionally, you know, in the evening, and I get to hear all the other side of things. And like I said, you know, I'm a Democrat, but I get to hear all the Republican side that comes down through the online news as well. And I like listening to it, actually. I like listening to the multiple facets of it all, because it all makes one big giant pie in the end of the day. But I really enjoyed that back and forth banter sometimes. And
do you ever say, "Hey, it sounds great, but I know it's not true"? Do you do that, or?
Oh yeah, and you know, I will gaze across the room and look at my husband, and it's like, really?
Okay.
But
right.
you know, you have to have this dialogue. You know, that's what makes us participate in life, is having these conversations. And I say that, you know, with all due respect to both parties, but you know, we're forming and formulating our minds. Our daughter is 27 years old, and you know, she's seeing all this. She's seeing the democracy play out. She sees me go work at the polls. She sees how her dad, you know, he's been with the fire department, you know, 28 years. So he's doing his service here too, and to the community. But this is how you participate in life. And it's just by listening, sometimes not having any feedback, but just listening and making your own personal choices there. Yes, I am an advocate. Yes, I do activism. Yes, I've stood on the front lines. Yes, I've lost friends to COVID. So it all is a big giant mix for how we're going to vote this season. And it truly is impactful in what we're going to do. But, you know, I get news from all sources.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Kyle, I'm going to send it back to you, Kyle.
Perfect. So now we want to just get into a discussion on the issues that are most important to you guys in this presidential election. What are the issues that matter to you most as a voter? and why? And Dylan, I will start with you.
Are we asking issues related to Indian country or to the nation itself?
Either or, issues related to the Indian country or just more generally would matter to you as, both a citizen of the Navajo Nation and America.
Okay. Well, let's see. More recently, I think I'm more or less concerned about this new Supreme Court nominee. Well, let's say I'm very disapproving of approving a new Supreme Court justice. When so many Republican senators had stated the exact opposite feelings that they did 4 years ago, and they're going through with the current Supreme Court nominee. Mostly because the nominee has some history that hasn't really made it to the mainstream talk of the issues, and I really feel like she might her stance is a little more a threat to stuff. A lot of moving, Roe v. Wade. Or really just ruling from the bench by using faith as a way to make policy decisions. I know she's stated she doesn't legislate from the bench, but there's a lot of questions currently with the current hearings that she's refusing to answer, and I find that really troubling at the moment. As apart from that, I think the pandemic I really wanted to end, and I think the polar opposites of all of our political leaders is really just it's stalling progress. We still have to pass the second stimulus bill. We have to find a way to coordinate to distribute a vaccine and find a vaccine. Those are just two issues. There's a plethora of others out there, but off the top of my head, those two concern me.
Right. Donna, what about you? As a voter, what issues matter to you most and why?
Sure. Yeah. As a voter, I want to make sure that we have this America to turn over to my son and my son's children and generation after generation. And for me as a voter, that is the biggest threat right now that I see, that our country's moving towards socialism. And I don't appreciate that. I took an oath to support and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so me as a voter, I want to make sure that we have this U.S. Constitution to carry us through. And really as a Native American, that is why we're able to exist, really, because of the treaties that we formed with this government. And if we go socialist, then that means that the government is going to take over our means of production. They're going to take over our water and our land and everything that we fought to keep throughout all of our dealings with the dominant governments. And I think we've come to a place as sovereign nations where we're really starting to see our own come around. And I think that's why you see so many people also that are Native running for different offices up and down the ballot. And I am running for office here in Duluth for our state Senate seat. And I am at the door. So this isn't me speaking, although this does resonate with me also. But what I hear at the doors are people really concerned about civil society. And I've lived in countries where there is no law and order, and it's not fun. It's chaos. And so people really want to be safe in their communities. The other thing, too, that I hear quite a bit about is, our burdening taxation. And those are things that people, we want honest and transparent ways that our government is spending our money. And so to me, this leads back to just sort of this big government overreach. And I don't think any good comes of that. And so I would say that for me, I'm listening to people as I'm door knocking, and they're telling me many different things, but top on their mind is really having a society that people can live in and feel safe in. And defunding our police or removing our police and peace officers is not going to be a good thing. In fact, Minnesota is a public law 280 state, so we have some of our tribes that rely on the state and the local law enforcement to help them in their in law enforcement. And so we just really need to think long and hard about how we're going to do some reforms. But those are the things that I would say are top in my mind and on our voters' minds that I've been to their doors and talked with them about.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Rosetta, as a voter, what issues matter to you the most?
What I worked on for several months in 2019, the Arizona House of Representatives and Senate passed House Bill 2570, which is the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Bill. And I was on the grassroots committee there where we attended the hearings. We helped push through the legislation and listening to testimony of men and women who have lost loved ones to that epidemic. So right now we need to focus. And I do know that President Trump did sign legislation in for Operation Lady Justice, which is helping on certain tribes and open cold case offices here. There is one in Arizona on the Gila River Indian community. But that really needs to get pushed to the forefront. It's an epidemic that's been happening in Indian country for decades, and something needs to be done about it. And if anybody can do it, we have to do it at the grassroots level. We got legislation pushed through. There's probably over 20 states that have legislation pushed through, but now there needs to be funding. There needs to be, meat and potatoes behind that legislation, meat and potatoes behind those words that are on paper.
Mm-hmm. And Manny, I'll come over to you. What issues matter most to you in this election?
I don't think any issue matters more to me than the safety of our mothers and sisters and daughters that Rosetta was just talking about. I grew up in foster care, held in protective custody. So ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act, is very important to me. And I think the important thing for me as I go as a voter, also, who is best positioned to honor the treaties, but also do it in a way where we as Native people can walk in step in the ways of our grandmothers and return back to that as we talk about our nation-to-nation relationship. So for me, it's those issues put into that lens as a voter that I come together at.
Right. And Donna, I just want to come to you with one quick question. Many would say that Donald Trump has disregarded tribal sovereignty a lot over these past 4 years. How do you feel about Trump's performance in regards to tribal sovereignty? Because you mentioned that a little bit in your answer.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good question. One of the things that really stuck out to me was the fact that there were Virginia tribes that had been advocating to be federally recognized for many, many years. I think it had been on the desk of several presidents, and it was President Trump that signed it into, signed it into law. So we have, I think it was 6 tribes that were recognized federally. And so I think that's a good thing. And of course, the missing and murdered Indigenous women, I think that's testimony to his respect for us, his Native people. And I was there in Bloomington, Minnesota, when First Daughter Ivanka Trump came to open our cold case office. And that, again, was a real testimony to how heartbreaking this epidemic is in Indian country, and the spotlight that this administration is putting on it really tells me that there is a concern and an interest in our Native community.
Mm-hmm. Dylan, I'd want to come to you real quick with a question. You being from the Navajo Nation, you mentioned that you've seen a lot of division in our politics recently, and the Navajo Nation has a vice president that is Republican and a president that is Democrat, and they both appeared on the opposite conventions this year. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that and how that makes you feel.
Well, I think people have asked Vice President Leiser and President Nez how that ticket, is in the office in our capital, Winter Rock, Arizona. President Nez says that he doesn't mind the two parties. He thinks it's more healthy that both parties are actually represented. As for the two conventions, I don't know. I think each one is just trying to play their narrative, I guess, to see which tribe is more friendly to Native Americans, I guess. I guess I don't really have any thoughts, strong thoughts on it anyway. President Nez is more often dealing with distributing, supplies and resources to the affected areas from COVID, and I don't think Vice President Leiser has as much publicity. Sometimes you see him here and there. Just the other week, I learned that he was in Washington, or 2 weeks ago, I think. And but honestly, I don't mind. I think as Vice President Biden says, it's important to that we not see each other as just red versus blue. Unity is the virtue of what holds our country together. So I honestly don't mind. But yeah.
Right. No, that's fair. Rosetta and Manny, I just wanted to get your thoughts. You mentioned Trump's efforts, Trump's pushing the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Do you both feel that what he's done in terms of Operation Lady Justice is enough? And I will start with you, Rosetta.
It's a start. It's a step. Any step forward by anybody in the White House that'll help all the Native nations with this epidemic is helpful. Hopefully there are 10 more steps behind that. Everything that comes down legislative wise has got to have some money behind it to help it though. Yes, there's a cold case office here now in Gila River Indian community, and they're working side by side with the Gila River Police Department. But, once that funding goes away, then what? You got 2-year funding, 3-year funding, then we're still back at ground zero. So there's always going to have to be more steps behind it. So thank goodness there is that first step in place, and we just need to keep the ball moving forward.
Right. I'm so sorry, Manny. I gotta throw it over to Levi. Levi, back to you there.
Okay. I just want to thank the panelists. You are doing exactly what we wanted you to do tonight, and you are really dealing with the issues and giving us some really great feedback. And I think that this will be broadcast on our website, Native News Online, and I'm not exactly sure when it'll be posted. I'm thinking sometime tomorrow, but from now until the election, so people will be able to click in, and you can tell your friends, family, and relatives, whole reservations, that to go watch you. But you're doing an excellent job tonight. I want to thank you. I'm going to take another quick moment to mention our sponsors, and the presenting sponsors tonight are Verizon Media, MMCA. The gold sponsor is the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe, located up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The silver sponsors Rosette Law, and bronze sponsors are Four Directions and Amazon. So I want to thank those sponsors. I think without their support, we just would not be able to do this. And I, as the publisher and editor of Native News Online, just really think this is a good step for Native News Online. We need to do more of these type of programs, and so that Indian country can be heard. And I just can't emphasize enough how important this is, and so I really do appreciate you. I'm gonna move quickly to the next question, or actually, it's not. It's an opportunity for you to tell a little bit about yourselves, and if you can, we're doing so well, but we think about the time constraints. So. Manny, why don't you start with you? Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself, and if you can just spend a minute or maybe 90 seconds at the most. Thank you.
Absolutely. Oddly enough, I know Donna, who is also on this panel. We both are from Duluth. Duluth is my hometown. I'm an enrolled member of Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. And it is in Duluth that I got my fire to do political activism. I grew up in the foster care system. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school since first contact. And I had the complete privilege to hear the stories of other youth like myself. I'm now 26, and we have a future. And we talk about 7 generations in Ojibwe culture and the 7th fire. And I think that time is now. And I think that when we look at this election, that's really the choices that we're talking about. What is the next steps for our people?
Great. Guys, I'm going to jump ahead to the next question here. I'm sorry, we do have to live with time constraints at the moment. I apologize. But Donna, I'll start with you. Thinking about the candidates of the 2 major parties, who do you think cares more about Indian country, and why do you believe that?
Sure. Well, I'll just go back to what I had said earlier. In the Republican Party, we have a platform that upholds our sacred life. We believe life is sacred, and I think that bodes well, especially with my Ojibwe culture. We also believe life is sacred. The Republican platform stands for property rights, individual rights, freedom, liberty. And, that again speaks well to me, because I don't think you can have a system of socialism. And if you look around the world, it's always the indigenous population that comes out worse under socialist systems. It'll just lead to tyranny and misery. So in that respect, I would say that President Trump is aligned with a platform that I am more aligned with, according to my values. The Democratic Party at one time was really, I think, a working party, and had many good ideas and brought lots of good things in our nation. But now there is this real movement, especially here in Minnesota, of the Democratic Party to be socialist. And again, no good comes to that. And I don't want the government to take over my reservation again, our way of life, suppression of our right to defend ourselves, our ability to practice our religion, our language, all of those things that we've fought so hard. And like Manny said, have come far enough now where we're able to do these things on our own and for ourselves. So I would say for me, I am voting for President Trump because he aligns with the platform that I align with as well. And I'm really worried that Minnesota will start the trend of socialism, and I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that doesn't happen. But I don't think our nation needs to go that direction.
You've mentioned socialism a number of times, and I think when most Americans think of socialism, I'm actually from Canada. I'm from a First Nation, and I think when a lot of people think that, they think of access to better access to healthcare, education. What aspects of socialism concerns you the most when you say it like that? I guess is what I'm wondering.
Sure, yeah, and what I mean by that is the government taking over, our way of life, our lives, our abilities to defend ourselves, our means of production. So the government is going to, take over everything that we have. Our banking system, our farms. If you have a family farm, goodbye. And that's what socialism means. And that also means oppression. And we have lived through oppression, and we don't need to do that again. So when you look throughout history and look at where socialism has taken hold, and we can just look to Venezuela and Cuba and China and just see, it's always come with violence, and I don't want to see us do that again.
And I'll go over to you, Rosetta. Thinking about the 2 candidates of the 2 major parties, who do you think cares most about Indian country, and why?
I had the pleasure of going to a Native American Democrats for Biden rally the other day, and I had read the document that had been published just recently, the Biden's outlining his policies that he would help with for if he gets elected. And I tend to vote down all blue. And I read through that document, and there are some points in there that I support, and there's some points in there that I question. And that's my opinion, my opinion only, to question a leader that's potentially be leading the country, but does he really have the best interests of all Native nations here across the great states, across America, at the forefront? But he's going to do his best, and I will back him to the polls.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there are some things that concern you about the Biden campaign. Can you name one or two?
Not without pulling out the document right at I don't have it in front of me, but every president makes promises. All candidates make promises. That's how they get your vote. So I just want to make sure that some of the things that he points out aren't just lip service once he gets into office, because we've had enough of that.
Dylan, what about you? Which candidate do you favor, or which candidate do you feel has the best interests of Indian country in mind, and why?
Well, from 4 years ago, with Donald Trump, we didn't really know what kind of politician he was going to be. But in 4 years since, I think the evidence speaks for itself. I want to bring up, the issue of the Mushpe Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts. The Department of the Interior, Trump's Secretary of the Interior, took the land out of trust from them, a land that they fought hard and long to procure. And it seems to be just an issue of one family not wanting the tribe to establish a casino on their sovereign land. And this is kind of reflective of a case back in 1993 when not President Trump at the time had another issue in New Jersey, in Atlantic City, when he thought that Native Americans shouldn't be able to establish their own casino. If the Department of the Interior seeks to de-establish a reservation and take land out of trust, what's to stop him henceforth another 4 years to go after another tribe? As I said, the evidence speaks for itself. There's other, with the border wall itself, the Kumeyaay people in Southern California, they want to protect their sacred sites, but they have been met with some fierce resistance from Border Patrol or state police. The Toda Odin people nation in southern Arizona as well are fighting that same issue. Those are just a few things I think Native voters should really pay attention to, is how much is our sovereignty really protected if one tribe is still suffering a current legal battle with the Trump administration over their sovereignty status.
Mm-hmm. Manny, I gotta ask for a brief answer here, but who do you think cares most about Indian country?
I absolutely think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris care most about Indian country, not only about how they address the issues, but about how they build a nation-to-nation relationship.
I think we're having technical problems.
I think we're having a little bit of audio problems.
I tell you what, let me move to the next question then, because we're running out of time. This is switching up the gears a little bit, and the National Congress of the American Indians says that 34% of Native Americans of voting age remain unregistered to vote. What would you tell your fellow tribal citizens, your family, friends who have been apathetic or apolitical for a long time? And I think we don't have time to get into the history lesson, and there may be justifiable reasons why people just feel like they don't want to participate in the American voting system. I, for one, I feel I'm a dual citizen. If I'm gonna pay taxes, I'm gonna vote. So I like that part of it. So speak to Rosanna. Talk to us a little bit about how would you convince those non-native or those Native Americans who just, for whatever reason, don't feel like participating?
I have involved with voter registration for years now in getting out the vote. And so I really find it, the conversations I have had, yes, are hard. And the conversations I get, the pushback from older Native Americans, elders, the reason why they don't want to vote is because they don't think their vote matters. But what I say to them is, do you pay taxes? Do you drive on the roads? Do you go use public transportation? Do your kids go to public school? All those are voted into law. All those percentages of taxes are voted into law by people who you vote into office. So you are indirectly saying you don't care about any of that. You don't care what your taxes are, how much you're going to charge for your gas. You don't care about the public education system because you're not going to vote. So you just have to kind of flip it around and have to say, well, you're taking part in your democracy here if you vote. So please have a voice.
Thank you.
Vote.
Rosetta, what about you? Up in Minnesota, what would you tell your fellow tribal members who don't feel as if there's a need to vote?
Oh, I think you meant Donna.
Donna, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. And well, what I would say is that sometimes you need to maybe just focus on one candidate. What is important to you? Is it a local race? Is it a congressional race? Is it the presidential race? Focus on that. Find out, as much as you can about each candidate. Make a wise decision, and then figure out where else you need to vote if you have time to do that. But I would encourage everybody to vote. And sometimes you just have to jump in and, go to the polls or get your absentee ballot and just do it. And you're going to learn a lot. And you'll find that candidates have a lot of information out there, their website or, the printed material, whatever it is. So educate yourself, read the party's platforms, and find out if you align with one party or another, or, some states have several parties. Minnesota has 4 major political parties. Read their platforms, even just their short platform, and find out if they speak to what your values are. So jump in. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Dylan, what about you?
I know there's a common misconception, that some Native Americans have smaller populations, that the numbers that we have are not, likely to influence the outcome of an election. But I would argue against that, because now with so many close races in so many states, especially Senate races, our vote, our voice is stronger than ever. Look at Arizona this year. I mean, there's 22 tribes in Arizona that could help decide if Arizona flips blue, if the late Senator John McCain's seat goes to Mark Kelly. The same thing happens up in Montana, in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, in Colorado. There's so many close races this year. I think sometimes a few hundred, a few thousand of those can have such an enormous impact when somebody like a senator represents millions of people from a single state, or a key state and electoral votes like Arizona could very well be this year. Could very well decide the results of an election more than ever. Our vote is stronger than ever. Which is why it's important that people get out, not only to register, but to encourage their friends, to talk to their families, and just do it for our elders. Our elders, they raised us, they protected us, they've guided us through all of our lives, and they've, my elders in my own community, you always see them voting in mass, and it's a good way to honor them. They say use our voice, to make change. They've used their voice, so it's our turn.
Man, you have 30 seconds. Bring this home.
That's just it. Voting is our most sacred tool to honor our ancestors. Voting is the way that we can say that it's not okay to let California burn. It's not okay that our sister tribes in Oregon have to evacuate completely, and have a president who's going to ignore that or inflame the situation by derogatory tweets, or to use our identities as a racial slur towards a candidate he doesn't agree with. As young voters, we can take back our identity and say, stop politicizing us. We're at the table. That's what our vote is about.
Thank you. Kyle, do you have a few comments to make? We're going to close this down here in about 5 minutes. Maybe you have time for one more question, and it has to be quick.
Right. I'm just curious. So I want to thank Donna for being the lone Republican with us this evening.
We did not do this by design. Trust me.
This was not by design.
People back up. We really apologize.
It was not some
I'm
sort
missing
of
the elephant in the room, literally.
But I just want to ask Donna, you have 3 Democrats around you right now. Have any of them said anything that might sway you in any way?
No, honestly, I find it interesting how much we have in common, really, how we're concerned about many of the same things, like the missing and murdered and, our forest management. But we just look at it through different eyes, and we have different solutions. And I think that's really what's so beautiful about America, is that we can come with these different solutions and craft them together, and maybe come up with something that's even more beautiful than what one person had or the other person had. We bring them together and we create something more beautiful.
Right. Levi, I'll send it back to you.
Okay, and I just, again, I can't thank you panelists enough. You've given us exactly what we really wanted, soliciting your opinions, your viewpoints. So often Native Americans just aren't asked, and I hopefully the audience out there, the rising crowd, will listen to some of our concerns, and we all know it's very important. And to the point, I think Dylan brought up about the states with senatorial races. Ironically enough, 4 of those states have been identified by 4 directions as being those states that have enough American Indians to really tip the balance, and that Arizona, Colorado, whatever. Let's see, North Carolina, and I said Arizona. So anyway, the point is, Native vote is very important. It can be very influential. You asked Senator Murkowski way back when the Alaskan Natives really kept her in the Senate, and I'm talking that was maybe 8, 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but I know she came to the National Congress of American Indians and talked about that. It was very, very powerful. So I want to thank you again, all the panelists, and to our viewers out there, I just want to mention that on Monday night, we're going to come back with another energizing the Native vote, and we're going to have panelists on Aaron Payment, who's the first vice president of NCAI, the National Congress of American Indians, will be with us. Yvette Joseph from Washington State. She's been a political operative out there for many decades. We have Senator Red Dawn Foster from South Dakota, and she represents the district that is out in Pine Ridge. And Kevin Killer, who is doing Native voting advocacy now, is going to join us, and OJ Siemens, who is the co-founder and founder and co-director of 4 Directions. And that is, we mentioned them a couple times tonight, but they are an advocacy group that really advocates on behalf of Native Americans to get to the ballot. And I just I want to say this, that on Monday, we will be publishing results of a survey. That the survey was, I think, going to end tonight. It's been out there for like 1 week, and we have already had 700 responses, and the responses have been pretty phenomenal. And I'm not going to share a whole lot tonight, but some of the issues you talked about tonight were very important to American Indians across Indian country. Tribal sovereignty being the number 1 issue. And then healthcare is right up there, very high. Environmental issues, and I often say that we have the same concerns as every other American. However, we have others that we look at it maybe through the tribal lens, and we will see. We do want to know how presidents will handle treaty rights, and the census is something that really bothers me. That and I'm not here to advocate one candidate or the other tonight, but the idea that the census was cut off early, it just really bothers me. And the experts are saying it was so that they couldn't get the accurate count from the people of color, and of course we are in that group. So I just think whoever we elect as president, I will say this to the viewers: vote. Regardless of party, vote. Please vote. And I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but please vote, because I just feel, and as I said earlier, I say it as a joke, if I'm going to pay taxes as an American citizen, I'm going to vote in the American election system. So with that, we're going to say good night, and come see us on Monday night on same channels at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and you will hear a great panel. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chimigwet.